This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Peace in the Middle East. They're working on it. Good afternoon. Welcome aboard. Talks continue in Doha, Qatar, to wind down the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. That war has been raging for a couple of years now. Reporter Elizabeth Palmer says for all involved, a ceasefire cannot come soon enough.
Every day without a ceasefire in Gaza is another day of hunger. Another day of Israeli airstrikes that kill the innocent. In Israel, too, every day without a ceasefire is a day of mourning for young soldiers killed in the fighting and for the hostages held by Hamas for a year and 8 months.
More than 56,000 have died since this war started October 7th, 2023, when Hamas invaded Israel. Crews continue to search for 170 people who remain missing nearly a week after the devastating flooding in central Texas.
We know that families are hurting and would love to hear more about their loved ones.
The death toll stands at 120. Miles of mud have complicated the search effort.
We are finding vehicles and RVs deep inside the debris that you can't even see from the outside. 5 campers and a counselor still missing from a Christian girls' camp that was washed away along the Guadalupe River. Christian musician and Texas native Chris Tomlin.
Think about these girls, right? These precious girls going to camp. And I'm taking my daughter to camp next week. I'm thinking about, dropping her off and just thinking about, wow, the devastation of what these parents are feeling, right? And just girls trying to go to camp, right? And how beautiful that is. And it's the summertime and all the things. And so it's just hard. The whole state is hurting.
Disaster specialist Larry Miner is leaving no stone unturned in his search for victims.
It's a hostile environment is what we call it. Everything is moved. It's shifted. We'll stay until we get it done. And we want them to have closure.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott's called a special session of the state legislature to discuss making improvements to the flood warning system. 31 construction workers were rescued last night from a partially collapsed sewer tunnel near Los Angeles.
Tonight, we were lucky.
No injuries reported. The men were trapped 400 feet underground. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass.
We spoke with the paramedics while the paramedics examined the men as they came up. And I just have to tell you that we're all blessed today in Los Angeles.
A wastewater tunnel under construction caved in the L.A. suburb of Wilmington. Democratic Senators Alex Padilla of California and Cory Booker of New Jersey are sponsoring a bill that would force ICE agents to remove their masks while making arrests. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley.
They have no problem with the Antifa losers wearing masks all the time on campuses and everywhere else. But if you're operating with the badge, oh no, now you're enemy number one. It's exactly backwards. We ought to say when you have the badge on, you ought to get all of the protection that you can possibly have. If you're a looter or a rioter, you don't have any right to be anonymous. You ought to be prosecuted.
ICE agents are not required to wear body cameras, and they don't need a warrant from a judge to detain someone. Pleading the fifth, the former White House physician for Joe Biden is refusing to cooperate with Congress. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer.
What Dr. O'Connor did only added fuel to the fire, that there was a cover-up and that Joe Biden wasn't mentally fit to serve as President of the United States.
The doctor in question, Kevin O'Connor, says the sacred patient-physician relationship makes it so he cannot answer questions on Capitol Hill. The Secret Service has suspended 6 agents for failures related to last year's assassination attempt on President Trump in Pennsylvania. Those suspensions come just 3 days shy of the 1-year anniversary of that shooting at a rally in Butler. President Trump is asking his transportation secretary to take on additional responsibilities.
Secretary Sean Duffy will serve as the interim director at NASA. President Trump withdrew his first nominee, Jared Isaacman, during the fallout with Elon Musk and reports that Isaacman had been a donor to Democrats. The space agency is at a crossroads as it works on missions to the moon and Mars. Duffy isn't the only multitasker in the cabinet. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also National Security Advisor and acting archivist. I'm Rory O'Neill.
Congress has advanced Lulu's Law. The bill's named after a teenager who suffered a serious shark attack last year in the Florida Panhandle. Lulu's Law directs the FCC to issue wireless emergency alerts whenever sharks are spotted in coastal waterways. California has been slapped with a federal lawsuit for violating civil rights policy. Has to do with that state's transgender-friendly policy when it comes to female sports. Governor Newsom calls the White House action belittling to trans people. Sophia Lurie is a former collegiate athlete and spokesperson for the California Family Council.
What's belittling is telling girls they have to share a podium with a male, telling girls they have to suck it up and deal with the chance of being injured on a field due to a male. Our governor is doing nothing for females in the state of California.
The Justice Department says California risks losing federal funding if it does not comply with Title IX. That's the landmark law passed 50 years ago that prohibits sex-based discrimination. There's a new hit song on Spotify for the AI generation.
Dust on the wind, boots on the ground.
Velvet Sundown song shot to the #1 spot on Spotify's European charts before fans found out it's a fake. The group is devoid of humans. The 60s-inspired rockers and their debut album Floating on Echoes were generated entirely by AI. Photos of the band on the album's cover could have been a giveaway. The four faces appear unnaturally smooth. The guitarist's hand has fused fingers.
Correspondent Deborah Rodriguez. And still to come on the Noon Report, Sunday hunting, Catholic lawsuit, and campfire therapy.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams, keeping an eye out for some locally heavy thunderstorms that'll roam parts of the area this afternoon and this evening. I'll have forecast details in 10 minutes.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. In the meantime, let's check the stories making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania. A boil water advisory in effect in western New York. More from Family Life's Dee Haley.
Fredonia Water customers, including those in the town of Pomfret, are on a boil water order due to treatment issues at the water plant. While water operators are working to correct the problem, the water coming from the treatment plant is still not safe to drink or cook without boiling. Residents will be notified when it is no longer necessary to boil water due to the ongoing notice. If you are a resident and unable to secure bottled water, a water delivery tracker is in place for those needing assistance. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
Thank you, Dee. New York State will begin mailing out inflation refund checks to over 8 million residents starting in mid-October. Those payments will automatically go to those who qualify. There's no need to apply. The refunds average to about $400 per household. They're intended to partially mitigate the effects of New York's affordability crisis. A bill to lift the ban on Sunday hunting was signed yesterday by Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. The centuries-old edict will end in September. Steve Smith is executive director of the State Game Commission.
Today, we celebrate making hunting more accessible for anybody who wants to pick up this pastime that is so deeply ingrained and embedded in the fabric of our culture in this Commonwealth.
Supporters say the legislation will result in more hunting licenses and more out-of-state hunters in Pennsylvania's woods. New York State Senator Pat Fahey has introduced 2 new bills aimed at flare guns. She wants to make them illegal for minors and increase the penalty if they're used in a mischievous manner.
The first bill is to ban the sale of any flare gun to a youth 21 or under. Secondly, I have a bill that would make it illegal to use any flare gun with criminal intent.
Over the 4th of July weekend, a young person fired a flare gun that caused a home to burn to the ground in the city of Albany. Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple.
I don't want to be the one to push the panic button and say it's becoming a problem. I'm not a guy that's big on over-regulating things. I think this is a phenomena, and I think that we will get through it. You can ban a flare gun, and they're going to move on to something else.
Senator Fahey's bill includes fines of up to $500 for first-time offenses. Repeat flare gun violations would be prosecuted as felonies if the senator's bill becomes law. As mentioned earlier, Democrats in the U.S. Senate are pushing for a bill that would force ICE agents to take off their masks while making arrests. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman is a Democrat, but he's no fan of this effort.
Absolutely unacceptable, terrible, awful. ICE agents are just doing their job. People in my party might treat them as criminals. That's inappropriate and outrageous.
Yesterday, ICE agents arrested an MS-13 gang leader in Nebraska. This guy is on El Salvador's top 100 most wanted list. He was picked up in Nebraska, of all places. Western New York Catholics are suing the Buffalo Diocese. They claim a $150 million settlement with child sex abuse survivors will be the death knell to their local parishes. The suit includes a temporary restraining order to stop pastors at 5 Catholic churches from paying the diocese by a July 15th deadline. Self-driving taxi cabs are in the works in New York City. These commuters not so sure what they think of that.
Self-driving cabs, not with it, no.
If it could get me to work faster right now, I'd like it.
I guess I'm just old. And this just seems ridiculous to me, and I don't see the point of it at all.
I don't know. I don't trust these AI stuff.
Yeah, me neither. Already, though, robo-taxis, or Waymos, as they're known, have been driving passengers around in cities like San Francisco, Austin, and Phoenix. A Pennsylvania truck driver lost his marbles yesterday, quite literally. Here's Family Life's Mark Webster.
Yeah, it was an unusual obstacle for drivers in Harbor Creek Township Wednesday morning after a truck lost a load of landscaping marbles, sending thousands of little green glass balls rolling into an intersection. Harbor Creek Streets Department was kept busy raking marbles out of the grass, while a street sweeper truck had to be called in to help make the roadway marble-free again. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
And sitting around a campfire is beneficial to your health. Check this out. Psychologists say fireside gatherings promote connectivity and relaxation. It's a combination of therapeutic factors here: the light from the fire, the heat from the fire, and the crackling sound that the fire gives off also can give your mental health a positive jolt. Experts say those who sit around campfires have significant reductions in blood pressure. One reason for this is that people who sit around a campfire tend to be digitally disconnected and isolated from the various distractions of daily life. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob Jazz Chisholm Jr. hit 2 home runs to help the Yankees to a 9-6 win over Seattle last night. Chisholm Jr. finished with 4 ribbies. Rookie Cam Schlittler, called up to replace the injured Clark Schmidt, got his first big league win. He went 5 1/3 innings, gave up 3 runs on 4 hits. The Yanks have now won 3 in a row. Bryce Harper had a big night out in the Bay. He went 4 for 6 with a home run, scored 3 times. Kyle Schwarber hit a 3-run shot, and the Phillies just blew out San Francisco 13-0. Jesus Luzardo struck out 7 through 7 scoreless innings to get his 8th win on the season. Salvador Perez belted a pair of home runs to lead the Kansas City Royals to the sweep of the Pirates, 4-3 the final last night. The Buckles are now riding a 6-game skid. The Mets-Orioles contest rained out. They will play 2 today. Other winners in the American League: the White Sox over Toronto 2-1. Tampa Bay knocked off Detroit 7-3. The Guardians doubled up the Astros 4-2, and the Angels outlasted the Rangers 11-8. In the National League, the Brew Crew edged the Dodgers in 10, 3-2. Reds victorious over the Marlins 7-2. The Cards fell to the Nats 8-2. And the D-backs handled San Diego also by an 8-2 score. Interleague play saw the Red Sox just clobber Colorado 10-2. The Twins doubled up the Cubs 4-2. And the Braves had no problem with the Athletics. 9-2 your final. That is a look at sports.
All right, Randy Man, thank you kindly. And still to come on the Noon Report. Close call in L.A. Unmasking ice and robot umps at the All-Star Game.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street. 100 years ago this week was a court case that was known as the trial of the century, at least until the trial of O.J. Simpson. It was in July of 1925 that hundreds of reporters descended on the small fledgling town of Dayton, Tennessee to cover Tennessee v. John Scopes, which has been immortalized since as the Scopes monkey trial. Now, according to popular myth, the Scopes trial was a climactic battle in the ongoing war between religious fundamentalism and science. At least that's how the story was told by the loosely based play-turned-movie Inherit the Wind. But in reality, the whole thing was a setup. The previous year, the state of Tennessee had passed an ordinance that made it illegal to, and I quote, teach any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible, end quote. The ACLU, a fledgling legal organization at the time that employed a strategy of suing laws in high-profile cases, had advertised in newspapers across the state that they were looking for a defendant to challenge this law. Dayton city leaders saw that ad and, hoping to save their dying town through tourism, basically voluntold John Scopes, a local gym teacher who once substituted in a biology class. Now, supporters of the law saw evolution as an affront to human dignity, a means of undermining the faith of young people. The ACLU hoped to undermine religious litmus tests in education like this one. So they planned to actually lose this local trial so that the law could then be challenged at a higher court. William Jennings Bryan, known as the Great Commoner, joined the prosecution to defend the law. Though not a strict six-day creationist, he was a staunch opponent of Darwinism and a champion of parental rights. Clarence Darrow was the most popular defense attorney in the country and also an ardent atheist. When he heard that Bryan had joined the prosecution, he volunteered for the defense. Joining this colorful cast of characters was Judge John Ralston, who clearly enjoyed all the publicity. In fact, on what would be the final day of the trial, Ralston allowed Darrow, the defense attorney, to call Bryan, the prosecuting attorney, to the witness stand. Bryan agreed on the condition that he could then call Darrow to the stand. And the two men did not disappoint. Darrow asked his village atheist questions. Bryan confidently responded before fumbling a few questions about whether the Genesis account was literal. The morning after Bryan's grilling, the defense pled guilty. And that prevented Darrow from ever being cross-examined by Bryan. And it also prevented Bryan, the great orator, from delivering his closing argument. So Scopes was convicted of a misdemeanor and fined $100, which Bryan then offered to pay. Bryan spent the next few days traveling to nearby cities and towns, delivering his closing argument as a public speech. The following Sunday afternoon, after speaking that morning, Bryan laid down for a nap. He never woke up. Soon, in fact, the details of the trial were lost to the public imagination, and a new narrative took hold. No one shaped that narrative more than H.L. Mencken, the most famous reporter at the trial, who described the whole thing as a battle between religious fundamentalism and progress. In his telling of the story, Darrow had embarrassed Bryan to death on the stand and exposed his religious beliefs as nothing but fables that could only be defended by intolerance and ignorance. And so in the end, the Scopes trial and its cast of colorful characters is really the story of the power of narratives to shape public perception. Thankfully, there are those committed to correcting this record, not only about the Scopes trial, but also about the history of supposed conflicts between faith and reason, between the Bible and science, between Christianity and freedom. Like all of those conflicts, the real truth about the Scopes trial is far more interesting than the narrative. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside we go. Weatherman Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life forecast for this afternoon. It'll be fairly warm and humid with clouds and sunshine. With a couple of thunderstorms and showers in the area into the evening hours. And any thunderstorm could produce a drenching downpour and some gusty winds. High today in the 80s, low tonight in the 60s. For tomorrow, partly sunny with an afternoon thunderstorm possible from the southern tier of New York into Pennsylvania. High temps 80s. Saturday, hot, humid, some sunshine. A couple of afternoon thunderstorms in the area with high temperatures in the 80s and lower 90s.
All right, heat of summer on the way. Thank you, Kevin. This is the Noon Report. I'm Bob Price, and lots to get to Thursday, the 10th of July. Israel and Hamas appear to be getting close to a peace deal in Gaza, but several hurdles remain for that ceasefire to take hold.
There are three main sticking points during these ongoing talks about a 60-day ceasefire and hostage deal, and the biggest one is where Israeli military forces would withdraw to during that time frame.
CBS's Weijia Jiang, 120 dead, 170 missing. That's the latest from the 4th of July flooding in central Texas. Kerrville Mayor Joe Herring.
The recent numbers reported break my heart.
NBC's Morgan Chesky grew up in Kerrville, the epicenter of this disaster.
6 days after the deadly surge, the scope of the damage still tough to fathom.
NASA sending specialized aircraft to the disaster zone to assist in search and recovery efforts. The governor's called a special session of the state legislature to find ways to improve early warning systems. There was a vigil last night to remember the victims and those who are still missing.
500 people showed up here at Kerrville's football stadium. Josh Smithson says it was a needed night for a lot of the locals. There was prayer and conversation and just community.
This is the beginning of healing, is us finding a way to be together as a community, just to be.
Still a lot to be done here, but it appears the healing process has at least started for many. Russell Scott, Kerrville, Texas.
For a complete list of Christian groups on the ground right now ministering to those flood victims, you can check out our website, familylife.org/relief. 31 construction workers got trapped last night when the sewer tunnel they were building caved in south of L.A.
When we raced down here, I was so concerned that we were going to find tragedy. Instead, what we found was victory. All of the men that were in that tunnel rescued. L.A.
Mayor Karen Bass says no injuries were reported. The cause of the collapse is not yet known. A Catholic diocese in California is telling its parishioners to stay home on Sundays if they're worried about ICE raids. San Bernardino Bishop Alberto Rojas has issued a decree that allows churchgoers to miss Mass due to concerns over immigration raids. The San Bernardino Diocese serves about 1.5 million Catholics. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker wants to ban ICE agents from concealing their identities when conducting arrests.
There has been a number of videos showing masked ICE agents in unmarked vehicles taking people into custody. So Senator Booker and Senator Alex Padilla of California just introduced a bill that bans ICE agents from wearing masks and requires them to display their agency name and either their name or badge number.
It's called the Visible Act. And so our bill is trying to actually protect ICE agents, protect the public.
A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson responded saying when officers conduct operations, they clearly identify themselves as law enforcement.
Scott Pringle reporting the Secret Service has suspended 6 agents nearly a year after the attempted assassination on President Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Secret Service Deputy Director Matt Quinn says it's a turning point.
Personnel were identified. They've been disciplined.
What did discipline look like in the post-Butler era?
Our discipline process is well documented.
6 personnel were suspended without pay, then placed into restricted duty, roles with less operational responsibility.
CBS's Nicole Skanga. Sunday marks the 1-year anniversary of the shooting that nearly took the life of the president. 1 in 3 U.S. teens today has pre-diabetes. Experts call that a direct result of sedentary lifestyles and unhealthy eating choices. 1 in 5 teens today are considered obese. Mattel is launching a Barbie with type 1 diabetes, and the doll includes a glucose monitor.
The toy maker is expanding representation with the new doll and said that it allows children to see themselves in the doll while also encouraging play that extends beyond a child's own lived experience. Barbie partnered with the nonprofit organization Breakthrough T1D in the development of the new doll to ensure an accurate reflection of the devices. The Barbie fashion fashionistas doll with type 1 diabetes is available for purchase through Walmart and Amazon for $10.99. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Some Ritz crackers are being recalled.
The taste of Ritz and real peanut butter in tiny sandwiches.
Some cartons of Ritz peanut butter cracker sandwiches could lead to allergic reactions. The individually wrapped packs may be labeled as cheese instead of peanut butter. And back by popular demand, the McDonald's Snack Wrap. After a 9-year hiatus, that food product featuring chicken, lettuce, cheese, and sauce wrapped in a tortilla is back on the menu starting today.
It had a sort of a cult following when it was around, and it was a decade ago, and consumers just haven't really forgotten about it.
Jonathan Mays at Restaurant Business Magazine says the snack wrap was taken off the menu back in 2016, but it's back now. Here's a question. What does it mean to be pro-life? That's the question we're posing to Roland Warren. He's the president and CEO of CareNet. Warren says the church, not politicians, needs to take the lead in the abortion debate that is raging in post-Roe America. Here's some of our conversation. Well, your new book is called The Alternative to Abortion, Why We Must Be Pro-Abundant Life. Not just pro-life, but pro-abundant life. What does that look like in real terms, Roland?
Well, really, it's based on John 10:10, where Christ said, I came that you might have life and then have that life abundantly. So essentially what it's saying is that Christ wanted us not just a physical life, but also eternal life. So really it's kind of looking at the life issue through the lens of not just saving the baby, but building a family and helping that family become disciples of Jesus Christ. Look, you can be an atheist and be pro-life because you're solving for physical life, but you can't be an atheist and be pro-abundant life because you're not solving for heartbeats that are heaven-bound.
Yeah, and that kind of explains your point that you make in the book, that this is a battle that must be waged in our churches, not in the halls of Congress.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, this is an issue for the pulpit. So we've got to exchange the podium for the pulpit because the podium doesn't have a perspective that's immutable. In other words, whenever the president speaks, they put his seal in front of it, right? Mm-hmm. But when the president leaves, they take the seal. In other words, a podium in and of itself is flexible, changeable. But the pulpit basically has the seal that comes from God. And it's basically living out the Great Commandment to fulfill the Great Commission. It's why Jesus came, that we might have life and have it abundantly. And if you think about from the perspective of the baby in the womb, who do you want advocating for you? Someone who might have a political narrative that includes you, or someone who views you the way the Scripture does, creating an image of God. And so that, from my perspective, the church has to lead on this and pastors lead on this as opposed to follow on this issue. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we've had, is that we've allowed the politics to lead, not the pulpit.
Roland, more than half of all abortions today are not performed at a clinic. They're do-it-yourself abortions that women are taking these dangerous cocktails of drugs. Many times it's causing serious health complications. How has this changed what it means to be pro-life when you look at the fact that I think it's now 6 in 10 abortions happen at home? They don't happen in a clinic.
Well, absolutely. And frankly, this is where the political narrative lets us down. I mean, if you look at the Republican platform, right, late-term abortions are the only abortions that are rejected. And 96% of abortions happen before 15 weeks. And in fact, we just saw that the Trump administration is going to move forward with the Biden's position on keeping the abortion pill available, which is basically 63% of abortions. That's why the politics can't lead. That's why the politics won't save us.
Amen. Well, everything changed. That Supreme Court ruling Dobbs v. Jackson in June of 2022, the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I hear this question all the time. I'd love to get your answer to it. What does it mean to be pro-life post-Roe? How do you answer that question, Roland?
Well, I say you need to be pro-abundant life, post-Roe and pre-Roe. Because the reality is, what does it actually mean to be pro-life? I mean, you have some folks that say, I'm pro-life because I believe in Imago Dei in the way that we just talked about. But you have other folks that say, well, I'm pro-life and I believe in a 15-week ban or a 20-week ban or some other thing. The term pro-life is on a spectrum. We've taken an issue that's an absolute, like Either children get life or not. You can't have half of a life. Like, you can't split the baby. Even Solomon kind of laid that out for us, right?
Yeah.
So really, from my perspective, when you start transitioning your view, that you say, well, wait a minute, I need to be pro-abundant life, then what that means is that you're focused on changing hearts. Because if you change the heart of somebody, even if abortion is legal, it's unthinkable. When Roe was in existence, I had people tell me all the time, well, when's Roe going to be overturned? And I tell them, Roe is overturned every single day. My wife faced an unplanned pregnancy. When I was 20, she was 19. We were undergrads at Princeton. I talk about this in the book.
Yeah.
She rejected abortion. She overturned Roe. That's the power that we have by the love of Jesus Christ. So really, my view is that the church leading on this, it shifts everything to anchoring it to Jesus' why statement, why he came, that we might have life and have it abundantly. Well, compassion for the pregnant becomes an issue that's a discipleship issue as opposed to an issue that's primarily a political issue.
Amen. Well, we talked about the church taking the lead here in this debate. Let's bring it down to a more personal level in conclusion. Roland, what can the people listening today, individual Christians, do to take up the mantle and carry on this ethos of making America not just pro-life, but pro-abundant life, as you write about in your book?
Well, one of the key things is really having groups in the church coming alongside people facing pregnancy decisions, and frankly, folks who have made abortion decisions in the past, so they can have compassion, hope, and help to be healed, so they can be mobilized as part of the army. We have a ministry kit called Making Life Disciples, which you can find at makinglifedisciples.com. And basically, the goal of this is to have small groups in the church being a compassion for those in the church who are facing a pregnancy decision, who wake up Sunday morning with a pregnancy test where the test is positive, but they view the news as negative. Who are they going to talk to in your church? Do you have a ministry to reach them? That's the difference between being pro-life and being pro-abundant life.
And that is Roland Warren. He's the president and CEO of CareNet, on what it means to be pro-life in post-Roe America. This is the Noon Report on Family Life.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. An early stationary front that reaches from Boston to Buffalo to Chicago will be the weather maker in the short term, kicking up a couple of thunderstorms and showers. Over the weekend, a strong front will arrive through the day on Sunday with widespread showers and storms expected then. For this afternoon, it'll be fairly warm and humid with clouds and sunshine. There'll be a couple of thunderstorms and showers in the area into the evening hours. And any thunderstorm could produce a drenching downpour and some gusty winds. High today in the 80s, low tonight in the 60s. For tomorrow, partly sunny with an afternoon thunderstorm possible from the southern tier of New York into Pennsylvania. High temps 80s. Saturday, hot, humid, some sunshine. A couple of afternoon thunderstorms in the area with high temperatures in the 80s and lower 90s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Finally at noon, robot umpires, automated umps are headed to the All-Star game next week in Atlanta.
Fastball low, and Hicks wants to challenge.
Major League Baseball will use the ABS system on Tuesday for the 95th Midsummer Classic at Truist Park.
This is our first hitter challenge. On review, it is strike three.
They used it in spring training. Everybody thought it was a good idea. In fact, 72% of fans say the automated ball strike system has been positive for the game of baseball. Robot umps could be a permanent fixture in big league baseball as soon as next year. We'll see how that goes. And that's our world. The world we live in, Thursday, the 10th of July. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.